Welcome back, everybody. It is Wins Above Fantasy, episode 166. As you're listening on the podcast, today is Thursday, January 23rd. For those of you guys on YouTube, we're recording a little early. It's Sunday night, January 19th. So hope everybody is staying warm wherever you're listening to this. I know, Steve, we were talking about the polar vortex all over again here. It feels like minus 11 outside right now. So what better way to bundle up than to just kind of dream of, the dew on the grass, wearing a t-shirt, maybe playing a little golf and talking about fantasy baseball. That's a tradition of mine, but this is a very draft related episode and one that is worthy of the discussion because we're talking ADP battles from pick 1 to 100, kind of that first 100 pick range, looking at guys that are similar either in skill set or I think most of these are position, if not exact, then close. And just basically taking the time to say, okay, if you are on the clock and you have to choose between these guys, because these moments happen all the time, this is the show where we're going to kind of break down what are the considerations, what's ultimately the direction we would go, and hopefully we can help listeners as well. But very excited to get into it all. It's been a couple weeks, Steve. Very much looking forward to this show, especially we got like 12 sets of these. So kind of doing the math, we probably got to keep it like, 4 or 5 minutes per ADP battle. So it's going to be a great show for anybody tuning in. Thank you so much. We will still be every other week for the next few episodes. We got an exciting guest on our next show. Steve lined that up. Hats off, but we won't spoil it. But thank you guys for tuning in, and you can follow us as always on Twitter at Wins Above Pod, on Blue Sky at Wins Above Fantasy, and I'm at Van_verified. That underscore is a dash on Blue Sky, and Steve is at Stav8818. Steve, how's it going, man? I know you got the freezing cold weather coming up, but talk to me about some vibes out there.
Yeah, currently getting dumped on with snow too. So
sure,
though it's starting to feel more like fantasy baseball season, inside my house, I'm in the middle of another draft as we speak. I'm on the turn,
dude.
so I don't think that we'll do a live pick, but several of these decisions had to be made by me over the last few weeks as I've been doing some draft and hold stuff. So really interesting. I know this is like in this league concept, right? Like they do a bunch of episodes like this. I know they did that back in the day. I'm sure they still do them.
The chicken or whatever it is, and I love it.
So hats off to them. But there's some really, really interesting decisions to make. I know when we were talking about this topic at first, it was kind of like, all right, yeah, we can kind of bump the ADP range out to top 200, 300 picks, whatever. But no, there's
too much.
Plenty of decisions, even just in the top 100, and those are arguably, the most important picks of your draft. Maybe not even arguably. So, a lot of decisions to be made from as early as round 1 through the top 100 picks, and it shapes your team. I know, when we discuss this, it'll be in the vacuum. There's a lot of context that's needed as far as what positions you take in other rounds. But still, these are decisions that at some point you're probably going to have to make one way or the other between these interesting players. So excited to do it. It's a great concept, and it's a nice reprieve for me from being outside shoveling. To come in and talk about some fantasy baseball stuff. So glad to be doing it.
I love it. I love the shout out as well to Bogman and the Welsh in this league. I thought about them too, Steve, when I was doing the rundown. I think one twist is they usually do it like high school debate team style, where they have to be pitted against each other. On this show, if we agree, we agree. But I do think we'll have to keep ourselves accountable to know true cop-outs.
And they usually do like one show per like battle, right? Yeah,
you're right. Yeah,
which you can do, like, and
you can go deep if you want. Yeah,
if we were like a daily show or something, or if this was our day job, we could do something like that. So we're gonna jam pack it in here, but I think that goes to show that it's definitely a topic worth talking about. That full shows we could have one of these debate, the battles, and that could be a full hour of content in my
Yes.
opinion. So it should be good to talk about that.
Well, can't wait. Without further ado, I think we can jump in. Now, we've looked at ADP from the month of January on. This is NFBC all drafts, just to get the housekeeping out of the way. And like you had mentioned in the rundown, Steve, we might have to have a sequel to this that gets deeper into the draft, because you can do a ton of these. But let's start in the first round. And this one is, instead of a mano-a-mano, we got a little 3-pack here. Question being, which round 1 outfielder do you prefer between a Juan Soto at ADP 7, a Kyle Tucker at ADP 8, or Fernando Tatis Jr. at ADP 10? So this is a combo that's pretty much back to back to back in the first round of the draft. And they offer a little bit different stuff. I had not spent time working through this question, and I think it's easy to say, like, I'd love any one of those guys. And for what it's worth, I would. But to make the decision that you have to make, that's what this show is all about. So I'll let you take a first crack at it. Again, we can't spend too much time on each one of these, because I know we could, but I'll come back with my thoughts on it. And I think the goal is we can't do the team build dependent.
Yeah,
and in the first round,
all of these will be in a vacuum. Yeah,
exactly.
Just to save context, because a lot of those questions would be answered. If you took an outfielder in the first round, this was a second round choice, you probably just would default to not taking an outfielder, right?
Yeah.
But hey, these are decisions that need to be made. And my first decision here is opposite of what the market is telling us. The market currently goes Juan Soto at ADP 7.65, Kyle Tucker at ADP 8, and Fernando Tatis at ADP 10. I would actually, and maybe I'm a sucker, I'm sure you probably saw this coming, or Van, or anyone who knows the show, but my love for Fernando Tatis knows no bounds. And I just think that would be my choice. I know all these players are extremely similar in the fact that, you can get basically 5 category production. Honestly, Soto's more of a 4 category guy, but he's so good in those 4 categories that it makes up for it. I know that's sort of a weird thing to say. Like, he's a 4 category guy that he's that good that gives you 5 category value. And he's also not a 0 in steals, right? Like, he's never stolen less than 5 bases in his career, which is pretty nuts. And I know that that year with the Padres, he stole 12. That was a career high, but I doubt we would see that again. But point being, you could probably bank on him for 5, which is helpful, right? Like, it's not like a guy that could also probably potentially be in this battle, which goes a little bit later to be included, like Yordan Alvarez. I guess you can kind of put closer to 0. Same with Vlad, something like that. So it's exactly what the opposite of what the market is saying, but I just think Fernando Tatis is like all the way back to like what he was pre-shoulder injury. The hard hit rate was back to 55%. That's what it was in 2021 when he hit 42 homers. He set a new career high in max exit velocity. The barrel rate was back all the way up to 15% after being at 11% his first year back in 2023 from that shoulder injury and wrist injury, right? It was 2 injuries, right? He hurt his shoulder and then the wrist with the motorcycle incident. The only thing that's sort of questionable was, just the 11 steals, but he did battle a leg injury that caused him to miss like 2 months of the season.
Yeah.
In season, and like you could tell, like I had him on my home league team, like the league that I cared the most about last year. For the 6 weeks leading up to him being shut down, like he wasn't running because he couldn't. He was running with a stress fracture in his leg, so the steals were just not going to be a part of his game. He looked all the way back after he came back from that leg injury in September and in the playoffs. Like it was, sort of like the Tatis, like homering every other day, 4 days in a row, things like that, into the playoffs. So that eased a lot of my concern with the new injury that came up this year. And it's definitely probably the most risky pick from an injury standpoint, but I also think it's the highest upside. Like Tatis upside, I think is like, like 2021, it's 40-25, which is, first overall pick conversation. Really, like, the best power speed combination, like outside of Ellie, that I don't think has the batting average downside. And honestly, even more of an upside with the bat, just was his bat to ball skills and contact quality of contact. So I would go against the market and go with Tatis for this one.
Yeah, yes, I am actually Tatis as well here, Steve. But I do have Soto coming in at second. I think Tucker is the safest. I mean, for what it's worth, these guys seem so established, and it's like Tatis and Soto are still 26 years old, and Tucker's just 28 years old. So like that to me is also like a compliment to how reliable any of them have been, just in terms of they've done this for years and years. It seems like, even though it's been a little bit riddled with unpredictability with Tatis. Soto, I do think one thing I wanted to call out is the first reaction is that the pop might go away with all the narrative around Yankee Stadium and the short left porch, all that stuff. But left center is friendlier in City. And if you look at kind of that, and I know it's not perfect tool, but if you look at like the savant stuff, it's actually the same amount of homers at Citi Field as it was in Yankee Stadium. So I don't think the pop is going to go away. I think the hard part with Soto, as I was like digging deeper, is when you give away the fifth category of steals, you kind of say, all right, but he's going to give you the average. He's going to give you the runs and RBIs that the other two won't. And Soto is just like, it seems like he should be a better average hitter than he's been. And that's been years and years where we've been saying that. Like, he perennially underperforms against his like expected batting average. And that to me is like, it's happened long enough to where that's clearly just part of his profile. And I know his profile changed a little bit last year too, where he reduced the ground ball rate, which is great. So again, I would love Soto, but I think I'm kind of done with just the aim small, miss small approach in the first round. Like, I think Tatis Jr. could go off and be 1-1. And I just don't know that Soto, without stealing double-digit bags, is ever going to come close. Tucker is an interesting one. And especially when he had the shortened season last year, it was actually the most he was pacing for power in a while, because for a while it was just like a metronome of, 30-20. And last year it was looking like he was taking a step forward on the pop with like the barrel rate and everything, but he also missed time as well. So it's like, I don't know that. And maybe that's to your point why Soto is third, because if it all clicks right for all three of them, does it look best for Tucker and Tatis Jr. because they fill up all five stats? But yeah, I think if I were to be put in a position where I had to make the call, I think I would go Tatis Jr. because he could be 1-1. And then I would go Soto because I think it's still a pretty good bet for like 280 and 40, even though Steamers got him projected a little bit lower at like 36 homers. I think he could still hit 40. And I just don't think that Tucker's going to do like a 40-20, 280 season in Wrigley, but maybe that's my Cardinal bias showing there. But that's how I would rank him, as Tatis, Soto, and Tucker personally. Any response on that?
The Mets are 28th overall by StatCast Park Factors for lefties. So not great. I mean, again, it's, you take it with a grain of salt with a guy like Soto, right? But it is definitely overall a downgrade in hitting environment to go from Yankee Stadium to Citi Field. So, one of the higher end places, at least for homers. I know Yankee Stadium gets a bad rap as far as overall hitters park, but for homers, it's definitely great. You can't argue that, especially for lefties, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think that's a good point. He hasn't had a BABIP over 300 since 2021. Again, last year, a grain of salt, it was 298. The year before that, 296. But yeah, in a season where a few more of those hits do fall, he's going to hit 300. Like, he can easily hit 300 in my mind. I don't think that.
But it's crazy. It's been since 2021.
Since 2021. Yes. But Yeah, so I think you're better off projecting for like 275 to be safe, 280, rather than the 300 that sort of could be the extra juice in the category. And yeah, Tucker, I love Kyle Tucker. Nothing against him. Like again, I think it's a slight downgrade in Park. Wrigley
Yeah, it
Field
is.
is also pretty bad for lefties. I'm looking at the StatCast Park factor. It's 16th, so closer to the average. But for home runs, it is is 23rd as far as park factor for lefties over the last 3 years. So again, a slight downgrade. I'm a sucker for Tatis, and that would be my pick. That being said, like any OBP leagues, Soto,
Oh,
right?
yeah, for
Also, the thing that you and Nick Pollock also talk about a lot, like in standard 5x5, a guy that walks as much as Soto does, those are basically empty at bats, right? Like, he played a full season last year and had 576 at bats. So, I know that walking is a good thing and we want that part of our profile. But as far as, and that leads to runs and more at bats potentially, because you're moving the chain and then moving the lineup down. But you have to take that into slight consideration, at least in your standard 5x5 leagues with Soto.
Yep. Yeah, I think the runs is the counter argument, and like again, he will help you there.
Yeah,
Of the three,
he had 128 runs last year.
yeah, that is a difference.
Crazy. Yeah.
And it's worth noting Tucker definitely the worst line or worst kind of batting order
Yes,
around him
that's
of the three.
for sure. Yeah.
Steamer's got Soto projected at 113 runs, Tatis at 107, and Tucker for 73. So when you I'm sorry, 101.
Yeah,
I was looking at the wrong one.
Yeah.
So Tatis, those are in that order of Soto, the most runs and RBIs projected, and then Tatis, and then Tucker, if anybody's counting. So, okay, that's good discussion. We got to keep it moving. And we're still in the first round, but we're switching over to pitchers. And we got Paul Skeens, we got Tarek Skubal. Of course, these are two guys you'd be so excited to see as your SP1. Steve, we're probably not going to see it because we're not investing this early, but I think it's still worth the question. I'll lead off on this one, that even though for all the excitement and the sizzle of Paul Skeens, I think I am going Tarek Skubal. They both similarly have just such a deep arsenal, which I think is what puts them here, as well as the 99th percentile in terms of strikeout rate minus walk rate. Like, they have the stuff, they have the command. Skubal, it's just like we've now seen this for not only all of last season, but the 80 innings prior. So the track record is there a little bit more for Skubal for me. And I think what little more you get from Skeens on a strikeout rate or a whiff rate, I think it's a safe bet to say a slight edge on volume that I would project out for Skubal. Now, it's not to say if Skeens is locked in, they're not going to let him go 8, 9, but I just don't think on a start-to-start basis you're going to see the same innings per start. I also still think the Tigers are probably projected at more wins than the Pirates. So this one's a little bit of a coin flip, admittedly, but I do think if it were me, I'm looking at Skubal and saying, the league's had longer to adjust and they still haven't. It's kind of a wash in terms of like both of their build, their extension. Skeens throws a little bit harder, but I think Skubal has the best swing and miss pitch of the bunch with his changeup. So yeah, there's a lot of factors where it's tough to kind of make heads and tails of which one is like out and out better. Skeens seems like more of like the generational one, but I do think when it comes to the stats, I would place my bet with Skubal. But go ahead and weigh in. Are you with me on this one? Or are you taking the other?
I am not. I'm going to have our first disagreement here 20 minutes into the show. So I'm going to go Paul Skeens. All the points you made are valid. I'm not dead set on this. And again, this is not a decision that I'm usually making. I just don't take a pitcher in the first round normally. But I'm just going with the youth factor, the fact that Paul Skeens has not had Tommy John surgery yet. Tariq Skubal did back in college in 2016. I'm not trying to speculate that there's
Something
anything that's
there.
gonna, but it's just something that has to be a tiebreaker for a guy that's this close for me. The fact that he did strike out 3% more of the guys that he faced this year with a slightly worse walk rate. The K minus BB is basically essentially the same. Skubal walked like 2%, 2% less of the batters that he faced than Skeens did. I would also think that the home park for Skubal is something that is in his favor. But PNC is also not horrible. It's not like he's pitching at Coors or anything like that. Probably a little bit worse of a division, I would say overall. For Skeens, so slightly better opponents, although I don't know, maybe that is a toss up too, or you could argue Skubal too because he gets to face the White Sox sometimes too, right?
Right. They're similar, man.
I'm just basically siding with youth and the little bit more strikeouts, and I would go with Skeens. I think that they're the overall hitting pitch will probably be pretty close, but it is a good point, right? Like Detroit made the playoffs, like they're trying to go for it this year. Like they signed guys that are win now. They added a few interesting players to their lineup, and definitely are much more of win now mode, which will lead to leaving Skubal out there in the fifth to get out of a jam, and then have a 1, 2, 3. Sixth and seventh inning to make up 2 extra innings where if the Pirates are out of it in March and Skeens walks 2 guys in the fifth, like even if he's hasn't given up a run, they may just opt to take him out there. So I maybe I'm talking myself into a little bit more Skubal, but I'm sticking with the youth and the slightly more K rate for Skeens for me.
Yep, that's fair. I think no matter what, it's an exciting one just to talk about because we usually don't grab those guys, so we're not breaking them down too often. But very exciting. Don't think you can go wrong either one. I don't want to imply that Skeens' volume is a true deterrent. I just do think if you said which one's more likely to get 190 innings, I do think it's Skubal, and I think that might add up to that whole.
That's fair. That's a good argument. I don't want to flip flop on my first one and have you convince me, but that's a really good argument.
It's a good debate. Okay, well, this next one I think is another. Not only is it a coin flip, but it's one that I feel like has been a coin flip for 3 or 4 seasons. Like this is a chalked up third base decision that not only is one you might have to make this year, but it's probably one you've had to make in the past. Austin Riley at ADP 32 versus Rafael Devers, ADP 35. Steve, it seems like from this Austin Riley's 2024, like the industry is speaking that they just feel it's a free pass. I mean, and there was injury with that as well. But he hit just 256 and had 19 home runs. But again, that was in 110 games. Dealt with a fractured right hand in August. It was just a weird year for Riley, weird year for the Braves all around. But he did start to warm up finally. If you look at like the splits, it was a very slow March, April, May, and then June, July, August started to look like, the Austin Riley that you sign up for in drafts. Still 27 years old and still crushes the ball when he does hit it. And then you go to the flip side and it's Devers. And Devers, similarly, you're kind of surprised for how long he's been around, still just 28 years old. And we saw another metronome season from Devers where it was more or less 30 homers, 270 average. And he crushes the ball as well. So these are kind of the oatmeal-y, get your power early on, get a reliable like second or third batter on your team. But how do you split between these two, or do you even feel strongly one way or another?
I actually kind of do feel pretty strongly, and it's might be surprising because I've been a Rafael Devers stan forever. Like I think he's been like the best second round pick that there could have been over the last several years. Like whenever he would fall in the second round, to me, I would love it. But I'm gonna go Riley on this one. Like there's no reason why he was as bad as he was in April and May. He had 3 homers through May and then started to heat up. Had 6 homers in June, 5 in July, 5 in 17 games in August. Like, so he was pacing for like, an 8 to 10 homer month. I know that particularly well because I had a mayor's bet with Alex Tran in the PL Discord that Austin Riley would get to 30 home runs. I think I made it in like May or early June, sometime like that. And he was essentially pacing for it like through the second half of the season. Like, he just needed 11 more homers in a month and a half, which, he had 11 homers in June and July. He had 5 in August. Like, he basically just needed to, do what he was doing from June on, and he would have got there. So it would have been interesting had he not gotten hurt. And I forget what his injury was. It wasn't anything like, he got hit in the hand.
Yeah.
And basically, like, his scan was like healing slower than his fracture was healing slower in September. Like, they thought maybe he could have came back for the playoffs or in late September, but it just didn't happen. So it wasn't anything that was concerning or long term that he won't have a normal off season. But like I said when I first started revealing that I preferred Riley, like, everything is in line. Like, the barrel rate was in line, the K percentage was in line, the hard hit rate was the best of his career. It was basically just a bad homer to fly ball rate for him. It was a 14.3% homer to fly ball when he's never had one lower than 19% outside of the shortened season in 2020 when he had a 16.7%. So this guy, is a lock essentially for mid 30s homers, and I don't see there's a reason that he would do that. And why I'm a little bit afraid of Devers is that he's had shoulder issues for several years now, and there's been some second halves of the season that he was so good in the first half that it kind of covered up that he was pretty useless. I think that was like 2022 when he had that bad second half of the season. And had 25 homers like basically shortly around the All-Star break and only finished with 2 more homers despite playing 141 games. Like, that's the thing with Devers. Like, he plays hurt. Like, he had those shoulder issues in 2022 and still played 141 games. He had some issues this year, still played 138 games. But he had issues in both shoulders, if I remember correctly, this year. And that's just a little bit more scary. And a reason for me to lean away from someone that, had some batted ball, had some unluckiness with the homer to fly ball rate and a slow start this season, followed by a freak hand injury. And then versus someone with Devers that's sort of been battling shoulder injuries on and off the last few years, and then had issues in both shoulders this year. I think that Devers, I haven't seen anything that would indicate that he wouldn't be totally fine and ready for spring training and have a normal offseason, but it's just something that is a slight tiebreaker for me that makes me go Riley.
Yeah, I'm going Riley too. I think, year before last, we saw 37 homers for Riley. It does seem like that, and 38 the year prior. It seems like he's 40 homer pop, and I don't think that Devers truly is. Like, the high water mark in the past, 5 years has been, well, I guess
38, yeah.
Okay, so he did have the 38 season. That's big. That was in 2021, but the past 3
that was
years,
essentially like what he was pacing for in 2022 too, and this year until he got hurt, and like he plays hurt, so like it's kind of is that worse? Like, he kind of the power essentially goes away.
and then you go to average after that. Like, okay, but it's Devers increased his line drive rate, but he's kind of just like hovering around more of like the past 2 years it's been 270. And in terms of like what we actually saw last year from him, the barrel rate did go up, but like some of the hard hit numbers slightly took a step back for Devers. It's like this one, I still would be okay with either one of them, but it just feels like Riley, we've seen the average as high as 281, 273, and I feel like there's a 40 homer bat in there. How would you grade the lineup context? Is that neutral, or do you still give the Braves like a slight
I
edge?
give the Braves an edge, but that being said, I think the Red Sox lineup is one of the more underrated lineups right now, especially with the young bats that are coming
Yeah,
up.
could get better with Campbell.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the Braves last year, like basically everyone underperformed and was hurt or was hurt. So I think that's sort of a one-off. But I know Atlanta is a pretty good park to hit into, but I would give the edge to the Red Sox there. I know Devers is a lefty, but you could still play Pepper with that wall. Devers always has a ton of doubles. Does have the pesky pull down the right field line there too, which is interesting. He plays a bunch of games at Yankee Stadium too as a lefty. Gets to face Garrett Cole, who will intentionally walk him with like nobody on and nobody out or things like that. It's close. I mean, honestly, I think if I didn't have the concerns about Devers' shoulders, I would lean Devers. That's how much I like him. But just considering that there is that in the back of my mind, I would go Riley. I love both of these players though, so this is a super tough one for me. This is one that like I would take whoever, like, if I wanted a third baseman in the second round and Devers went first, I'll take Riley. If I wanted a third baseman in the second round and Riley went first, I'll take Devers. Like that, I'm cool with either one.
Yeah, pretty dang close.
Yeah.
So I'm similar. And even like the strikeout rate for Devers took a little step back last year to where their profiles look very, very
They look
interchangeable
exactly the
at
same.
this point.
And
So,
like I think they talked about it on Rates and Barrels too recently. Like if you look at their numbers over the last 3 years, like it's unbelievably close. Like their WRC pluses and within like 1 point of each other, not just like for like last year, like for a season like a sample size of 3 seasons. It's pretty insane.
Yeah, and here's the cop out that like if you need raw power, I mean, but even that's debatable. We're spending too much time on it. It's a great debate. I think we're both leaning Riley, but we both would take Devers.
Yes.
And we got another one round later, but we do have to take our first ad break. We'll be right back after this. Okay, so Steve, moving from third over to shortstop. The debate is Corey Seager versus O'Neal Cruz. Now, in terms of ADP, Seager is actually behind O'Neal Cruz. Seager's at 48. O'Neal Cruz is at 43. That was kind of interesting to me because I feel like in years past, it's like they're slowly moving in opposite directions and meeting in the middle here, where Seager for a couple of years was like a late second, early third round, it seemed. And then O'Neal Cruz has been like from pick 100 to pick 80 to 60. And now after a good year last year, but still kind of I want to be careful how I position this, but kind of a middle of the pack in terms of the range of outcomes for O'Neal Cruz. I think we were joking last year that like at the start of the year, we were like, oh, it's either going to be all or nothing. Like this guy's going to be MVP or the bottom's going to fall out. And it was kind of just in the middle with a 2020 season and hit 260. But Seager, 278, 30 home runs. Now you don't get the speed with Seager at all, which is probably where, the debate lies. And it's easy to say like team context. But where do you fall here between Seager and O'Neal Cruz? Because I feel like unlike the last round, these are very different players. And obviously we could say it depends on how your team is built, but in a vacuum, do you like Seager or Cruz more as kind of like a fourth round bat this year?
It's tough, and this is a cop out, but O'Neal Cruz does have outfield eligibility,
So that's part of it,
which is nice. And yeah, it is surprising that Cruz is above Seager at ADP. I wouldn't have thought that was the case, but NFBC ADP loves O'Neal Cruz, right? He like went around like pick 60 last year, coming off a season where he had 9 games played and was, an ankle injury that there was long-term concern, not just for last year, but for, going forward in the future. And it turned out to be a good bat. Like O'Neal Cruz had a great year. 2020 with a 259 average, 110 WRC plus. Like he basically returned value. But
your concern was the splits. I remember we talked about that.
And he was much better versus lefties in the second half, and like the Pirates played him, like, which is a big deal, right? And I think that for someone that has a 15.7% barrel rate, even with slight ground ball issues, like the 17% homer to fly ball rate is low. Like O'Neal Cruz has the raw power to hit 30 home runs at least. Like he underperformed that in my mind, even with a fly ball rate of a ground ball rate of 47.8%, which is high but not horrible, right? That being said, and this may surprise you, but I'm going Seager.
Same. I am too, Steve. I am too.
The only thing with Seager, and it's a valid issue, like plate appearances over the last 3 years, 533, last 4 years, or 5 years, excuse me. 533, 536, 663, which is great. 409, and then it was 2020 was a full season too, so that's not fair to include. So last 4 years, like you're averaging basically 520-ish plate appearances, which is it's pretty low.
The flip, the excitement is that he put up the same power numbers the past 2 seasons.
Yeah, whenever he plays,
like 2/3 of the plate appearances.
Yeah.
It's almost like remember when Buxton was in this, like in Buxton's prime, which is we're getting old, but like it was like, oh, when he is, or it's like the Royce Lewis thing. It's like when they are out there, it's the results you're getting are massive. So I think if you, like in a league where you have an IL slot and you add in that like flexibility, then it kind of
you get a good replacement player for him. Yeah, that's a great call. Like in an IL slot league, like I think that's more of a no-brainer. But yeah, you're right. Like his per 162 numbers over the last 2 years are absolutely insane. He is, a top hitter. He is one of the few guys that could, one of a dozen guys that you could probably project for close to an 800 OPS, right? Like he's just that good of a hitter.
Oh yeah. And like, I think when you look at like just season before last, 33 homers, a 327 average, and like nothing has tailed off. Like he's still top of the line in terms of like barrel rate. It's just you're not getting the speed, which I guess is the crunch. But
yes, that's also another big factor, right? Like, you need to have, you can't go Soto and Seager, right? That's just not a combo that's going to work.
And by the same token, everybody's talking about how much more prevalent speed is in the later rounds of the draft. And there's both sides of the argument that means you got to load up early on to keep up with the pace. But I think what Seager gives to you with like power that also comes with the possibility of a 300 batting average is so rare that I would be willing to roll the dice on, what could it look like. Truly the upside for Seager is probably like 320 average, 40 home runs, and the counting stats that would come with that.
He's like Yordan Alvarez at shortstop, right?
Yes, exactly. And Yordan is going, a good 20 picks sooner than this. So Alvarez is ADP is 17, and then Seager you got ADP at 48. So
30
you're getting a 30 pick discount, and I love that comp. Just maybe a slight tick down on power. So I think we're in agreement on that one. But yeah, Cruz in general, especially with the outfield eligibility, because outfield, once you start getting other names,
it dries up quick. It dries up
quick. And that's probably the segue, because the next one we got is 3 picks after O'Neal Cruz. We got an outfield battle. We got the youth battle here between Wyatt Langford at pick 46, who was largely a disappointment last year until he went off in September. And then James Wood, who became one of the hottest spring training stories, and everybody was kind of thinking, will the Nats actually give him a full run and try to, go for some of the rewards for that as an organization? They didn't. They were late to call him up. And then when we did see Wood, he was excellent. So you got kind of the late breakout last year in Langford that came with the prospect pedigree. Everyone thought he would be, OF1 by the end of the year. And then James Wood. And now both these guys are pretty much going at OF1 type of draft tax. So where do you fall between these two? This was one that I had yet to make my mind up on. So this is kind of fresh research and scrutinizing, but I think I've planted my flag. I know I've got one.
TBD.
But I want to hear where you're.
All right, nice. You want me to go first? All right, sure.
You go.
I'm gonna go James Wood here.
Same. Yes.
And maybe I'm a sucker for batted ball metrics, but everything looks really good under the hood for James Wood. That did not mean to just make a rap song like that, but so be it. The 10.6% barrel rate, the 52% hard hit percentage. I know the K rate is a little bit high, and it's been high at all stops in the minors, but still walk 12% of the time. The O swing is great. The Z swing is low, so I imagine a lot of that is from like called strikes, right? The contact percentage is at 73%, which is not great, and yeah, that's going to be a guy that's going to strike out, in the high 20% of the time. But that being said, everything else looks really good with James Wood, and I think that he is the kind of hitter that you project for a K percent improvement as he gets older, rather than project him to the same at his first taste in the big leagues as a 21-year-old, excuse me, for the most part last year. So looks like he's a freak of nature, 6'7", wheels. He did run 22 times, was caught 8 times, but still had 14 stolen bases. That's love to run wild. Langford looked great. I'm just hesitant to sort of be back all in after one good month in September. So I'm going to go Wood here, just based on the batted ball metrics. But, I could easily be – it's another one. I don't want to, give a cop out, but I probably could see why you would go Langford there too, but I'm going to go Wood.
Mm-hmm. Slightly different. Yeah, you're getting a little more speed from Wood. I think 2030 is kind of the hope with anything on that being like icing on the cake. And the average was solid despite the sub 30, just around 30% strikeout rate. And he hits the ball pretty hard. I think with Langford, like that's the hard part is those September breakouts, you never really know what to do with them. And even going into like the StatCast game logs, like most of those, there weren't impressive pitchers that he was hitting those home runs off of. Where you go to James Wood and like he hit a homer off of Zach Wheeler last year, and it's like, okay, they're both obviously super talented, but when you're in the space of splitting hairs, I'm all for the guy who's running like crazy, and even if he's caught stealing, we've seen that happen with like CJ Abrams, and it's like it works out when they do get to run wild, and suddenly you've got like a 2025 homer and 40 season, and you're not shocked by it. So yeah, and I just there's something I like about Wood in terms of the actual player itself. Like he's a fun Twitter search on some of his like off-season stuff. I'm a sucker for lefty swings as well. So both of them, I gotta say, it does feel early in the draft to where I'm not going to be like salivating if I am looking at either one of these guys.
I don't have any shares of these guys for full clarity so far yet this year.
But it's kind of like, and it makes it interesting with like I would like O'Neal Cruz as my outfielder over either one of these guys, which ADP is in line with. But outfield, man, it's kind of tough. Like when you look at this, and it's like the ones before this. I mean, Acuna is another level, but it's like you got Michael Harris II at 38, and then you go after these guys all the way down to like Teoscar Hernandez, which is another one that we'll talk about. But yeah, I think in a vacuum, I would take Wood, but I'm not in a huge hurry to grab either one of these guys. Any final thoughts on that, Steve, before we jump to second base?
No. I think we're good to move right along.
Okay, well, this is it's almost similar to Austin Riley Devers, because this is one that's ADP debate, tale as old as time. Jose Altuve and Ozzie Albies. It's just in the past it's been like second, third round, and this year the debate is much later with Altuve at a 57 ADP, Ozzie Albies a 62 ADP, and Albies all of a sudden, Altuve all of a sudden has lost. Tucker in that lineup. Who else is off of the Astros?
Bregman
right now. Bregman. So yeah, it's starting to just look a little bit different in Houston.
It's basically just Altuve left from like the 2017 World Series, right?
I think so. Yeah. Because no Correa, none of the.
Springer's gone. Yeah, maybe
Yeah.
there's a I don't know. Ryan Presley maybe was there. Lance
Yeah.
McCullers, I think maybe.
So to
yeah.
briefly hit on Altuve, I mean, what we've been saying lately is even though the past 4 or 5 seasons it looks differently every year, you're going to get some kind of productive season, and last year was no different. A 295 average, 20 homers, 22 steals, and some of the counting stats that you used to bank on as like being a plus were just solid last year with like 94 runs, which is good, but the 65 RBIs, and he's usually not an RBI guy. But yeah, it was still really productive for him being 34 years old. And then Albies that we talked about earlier this year, it was and has been just kind of a bizarre, like it just wasn't pretty. He was right at the center of the weird Braves offensive year, and he only had 100 games played. So he dealt with injury. It was a left wrist that was fractured. He also had a toe at the start of the season. So he missed a good 50, 60 games. But when we saw him, it was just a 251 average, a 707 OPS. He ran a little bit, but overall he was pacing for more of like a 15-15 season. Now, that said, he's 6 years younger and on a much better offense. So where do you fall, Steve, between Albies and Altuve?
I'm gonna go Albies here. That probably strays from where I would have been in the past. I've always loved Altuve. I always thought he was like a guy that was perennially underrated because of his age, and continued to put up 30 homer seasons into his mid 30s as he's done now. But that's slightly fallen off a little bit, after back-to-back seasons of OPS over 900. Insane. I know last year was 2023 was shortened too. It was only 90 games. It was down to 790 this year, and it's hard to project bounce backs as guys get older. But I'm gonna go with Albies. He was, had that injury. I think he couldn't even hit once on one side of the plate. I think due to one of his injuries last year, or did very, very poorly as a righty, which he usually dominates lefties. I think that's that. I think I have that right. I'll pull up his career splits in a second here. But another funny thing with Albies, back to 2020, his career total, or his yearly totals for homers. In 2020 was 6, 2021 30, 2022 8, 2023 33, 2014 10. 2025, he is a lock for 30 homers, following what Gray at Rasball calls Saberhagen metrics, because Brett Saberhagen had good years like every other year. So Albies is due for a good year after having, I kind of wish it was single-digit homers. I didn't wish he didn't get to 10. So that it could stick true in line to that. But still, crazy down year for Albies and the Braves and that whole lineup. I would go Albies here, just based on youth and the fact that I think he's more of a lock for, closer to 30 homers than Altuve is, which I would probably project him for closer to 20.
I agree, and I think I I agree that Albies has kind of this higher ceiling, but I am going Altuve in the vacuum here. I think mainly because second base being the wasteland that it is, I would be more okay with just signing up for like 285, 1520 or 2020 than possibly having the down years that Albies has shown, because at this point, and you look at Altuve, minus the shortened COVID season, which ironically is the year I rostered him in my home league. You've seen productive years for him from like 6 years in a row that you would have been perfectly happy with what he gave back given his draft position. And even last year, the 22 steals, I like that he got caught 7 times. Like, I think when you have an aging star like Altuve, you're hoping to see some of those athletic base metrics hold, and so far
you want to see a lot of attempts. What you don't want to see is like 5 and 0 if he didn't get caught,
Exactly.
right? He only ran 5 times, right?
So it doesn't seem like he's slowing down
Mhm.
in that capacity. And the Astros lineup is a little bit sneaky. I think Isak Paredes is going to be a ton with the Crawford boxes. Christian Walker's a nice add there as well. And if Alvarez can stay healthy, I don't see why Altuve shouldn't be at 100 runs as long as he stays healthy. So that rounds out the Altuve Albies debate. Now we got a couple of kind of lightning 4-packs, Steve, and we'll have to move through these slightly quicker,
Yeah.
but starting with the pitching, all between picks 65 and 70. Garrett Cole, Michael King, Framber Valdez, Pablo Lopez. Now, there's a lot to break down here. We're not going to do it justice, but got to hear kind of where you're falling between this 4-pack of Garrett Cole, King, Framber, and Pablo.
Man, this is super tough for me. I really like all of these guys. Fromber was so good in the second half after it looked like he was kind of the wheels were falling off in the first few months of the season there. And Michael King, your boy, a guy that you were hyping up all off season after there was some hesitation too, like did about as well as we could have expected, like and beyond really what anyone expected in his first full year moving to the
Padres,
to the rotation in the Padres, right? Like, made like even just the number of starts he made 30 starts after throwing 104 innings and only those 9 starts in the last month and a half the year before, and did it with a 28% strikeout rate. Like, and honestly, I think that's going to be the tiebreaker for me. He has the highest K rate of these guys. And if I was taking a starter there, I think I would lead King. I had a feeling that you may be going the same way, and it's going to be a shame if we only really dive into one of these guys. And I guess I'll go on a little bit of a tangent. Like, Pablo Lopez is criminally underrated. Like, he was super unlucky last year.
Yeah.
I know he may not get back to like that 2023 30% strikeout rate with the 14.5% swing strike rate. But he is very much the pitcher that he was in 2022 and 2023, which is, a mid threes ERA, mid to high threes ERA, with, more than a strikeout per inning and a guy that's going to give you really good volume. So I like Lopez a lot. That would probably be my second choice. But I would go Michael King.
Yeah, I am going King first. I think, obviously the volume is the biggest question, but it's the one that he just answered. And I think there's something to the fact that, and I know I'm not making light of relievers coming in. That's hard for them to just immediately ramp up. But in the grand scheme of things, I feel like there's mileage to be had when you've only thrown 400 innings as a professional or as a major leaguer. So I think that King might be building on kind of the momentum he had as a 173 inning guy last year, whereas Cole, it's going the wrong direction. So while I'm not afraid of grabbing Cole in this range, these are good options, Steve. And I think it's options that will probably, in a lot of instances, be our SP1. But I would go slightly Framber, then Pablo, and Cole last.
Sure, that's fair.
King,
that's fair.
Just because Framber did find the curveball throughout the season, and it turned into the kind of the strikeout pitch that was missing. And yeah, his K rate jumped from like 18% up to like 30% in the second half.
Yeah, he looked like peak Framber.
He did, and it's like, and he comes with kind of that, Sandy Alcantara type of like volume workhorse thing. Good at ground ball. I mean, as good as it gets on ground ball. So Framber definitely has like that easy path to ace him if he just continues with what he did last year and what he had done in the years prior. So I think I'm going King just for pure upside that, like, he could be a guy that, 15 starts where he's getting 9 to 12 Ks. That wouldn't shock me for King. And then Framber slightly after that is how I order them. But I do like all these guys with Cole being last of the bunch. But for time's sake, we got to jump to the hitter 4-pack that's also in this range, ADP 63 to 70. We got 4 guys here slammed in. Now, some of these are util. You got Schwarber, or I'm sorry, in order, Brent Rooker, Marcell Ozuna, Kyle Schwarber, Teoscar Hernandez. That's the order they go in. Steve, I have yet to really decide on the order, but we've been talking about a handful of these guys all off season. I think I can try to solve the puzzle personally and say I would be going Ozuna, Rooker, Schwarber, Teoscar. But I want to hear where you land, and then maybe we can break down one or two that we really want to hit on.
I think I'm going Rooker here.
Okay.
I think that might be a little bit surprising, but I don't know. I think that there's a bias against Rooker because he kind of broke out late, wasn't this big prospect, was really good in 2023, but had that extremely high K rate, a lowish batting average. But he basically repeated last year and did a hell of a lot more. 39 homers, a 293 average. Yeah, sure. I know he's probably never going to come close to that again. But he did improve the strikeout rate by 4%, improved his walk rate, improved his elite barrel rate from 15.6% to 16.6%. A hard hit rate was exactly the same, set a new high in max EV, and I think that, he hits the ball so hard that he is going to run a BABIP closer to 320 than like 280, which should, I think, easily project him for like a 250 average with high 30s homers. Maybe Ozuna is a little bit of a safer play, but he is older. Also, Rooker is going to play in the outfield this year. I think they Oakland,
That's right.
not Oakland, whatever they are.
The
Athletics have said that they want to get him in the outfield some more, which he should get outfield eligibility at some point. Maybe it's not going to be like the first few weeks, like guys who go through a normal position change do. So it may be a little bit overweight in NFBC where you need 20 games, but in Yahoo where it's 5, like, within the first few weeks, you'll probably get there. So I'm going to go with maybe what is a bit of a surprise in Brent Rooker, but there's not much to dislike about his profile. And, he is just 30, right? So it's not like he's Ozuna is coming up there. He's going to be, he just turned 34 in November. So, yeah, I'm going to go Rooker here, a player that I love and already have a few shares of for next year.
Yeah, he also hit 11 stolen bases. I don't know that you're signing up for that, but you're obviously not getting any speed from Ozuna. That said, I mean, we're now looking at 2.5 full seasons where Ozuna has looked pretty dang close to like a Yordan Alvarez in terms of all the hitter metrics and that lineup as well. Yeah, I love Uncle Ted in the chat. Why aren't they called the California A's?
It should be,
yeah. So I think and Rooker with outfield, that's a big deal. That's actually sneaky because I like Rooker if he can get that outfield eligibility. I like him more than I think any name we've talked about so far for outfield other than the first round guys. So I would even put him ahead of O'Neal Cruz on my personal list if I knew he was walking in.
Yeah, he does. He is getting the util only discount. That's for sure.
Yeah, but I like him. I like him over Wood and Wyatt Langford personally because again, I think you can kind of make up for speed super late. So I like those. The only one of the bunch because I think Schwarber kind of set it and forget it. He's a joy to roster.
He's worth the conversation. Yeah, I can see taking him.
He'll have especially a roto guy, Schwarber, because he'll have his cold weeks. But man, when he goes red hot, that's why. Like last year was almost a power down year for him, and he still had the 38. So yeah, the only one, honestly, I don't know, Steve. It's insane saying it is cleanup for the Dodgers because that's so tempting. But like, are you in on Teoscar with his 29% K rate and like, it's like he comes with the K rate of some of the other guys, but he doesn't come with the 40 homer.
Yeah, he comes with 30 homers, right? Yeah.
So I don't know about Teoscar.
Yeah, he probably would be fourth for me on this list. He did chip in with 12 steals. I know it was a contract year again for him. It was just a 1 year with the Dodgers last year, and then he re-upped. You know, and I know that down year came in Seattle, which was, you know, he's said as much. It was a horrible place for him to hit, and everything did turn around and look great this year. I know he doesn't walk that much, which we don't really care about in 5x5 at least. But you know, I think there's a lot to like with Teoscar, like the 15% barrel rates over there, hits the ball hard, you know, 45% of the time, if not more, every year. Set a new you know, had a great max EV in line with 2021 2022 when he popped the 32 homers in 2020 21. So
you know what's funny,
I don't question it. I like Teoscar. It's just I slightly prefer the other guys.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm probably being a little bit too harsh. And what's funny is you would look at cleanup for the Dodgers and be like, oh man, if you're playing 154 games with a 15% barrel rate, you got to have 125 RBI.
Dude, yeah, Ohtani just knocks himself in. Yeah.
The bases are empty, dude. You got Ohtani, Betts, and Freeman in front.
Yeah.
So that's just a funny, different twist to the typical narrative. All right, so that's the 4-packs there. I agree, and I think you're talking me into being comfortable with Teoscar, especially since I'm not.
I would be good with any of those guys.
Yeah,
if you're like I need a power outfield bat here, yeah,
anyone
good with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
We got to take our second ad break, running a little long, and then we are getting into two pitcher debates, 2 hitter debates, and we'll be right back after this. Okay, so Steve, this is a fun one here because we get to talk about the sizzling name of Roki Sasaki at ADP 80 next to Shota Imanaga at 82. Sasaki rounds out what is probably the most insane video game rotation I've ever witnessed.
Rest in peace, Bobby Miller bounce back season.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah, the 9-man rotation, but Blake Snell, Yamamoto, Tyler Glasnow, Sasaki, and Ohtani. If that's how it shakes out, Sasaki coming over from Japan, 23 years old. Insane stuff in terms of like the tunneling, the velocity, the IVB. There's stuff, you know, Rob Friedman stuff that you can just like salivate at how these pitches, you know, looks identical. And then they just completely, you know, break down in a way versus rise on the fastball. So very exciting for Sasaki. But there's some like there's a note on his Fangraphs page that like his stuff regressed a little bit last season, which was interesting to hear. And also we haven't seen him is the obvious factor in terms of the majors. So you got that next to Shota Imanaga, which I think I'm on the record saying I'm excited and interested. To me, he's my George Kirby light 30 picks later with the elite command he has and the fact that the strikeout numbers are still pretty solid. Imanaga and you know 30 starts pretty much last year, had a sub-3 ERA and a 102 whip and a strikeout per inning. And then you got Sasaki. So is this just as simple as, and I guess we can't give ourselves that out, but certainly Imanaga you feel like is a very high floor pitcher, and Sasaki could be an SP1, and also just from sheer risk of not seeing what he'll do in the majors, it could be a rough gamble if it doesn't go his way. Talk to me. We have yet to even talk about Roki Sasaki on the show, Steve. Yeah. Talk to me about Sasaki and where do you fall on this ADP battle?
I'm going to go with Shota Imanaga here.
Okay.
I don't think this is going to be an ADP battle for long, though. Now that Sasaki has signed and is with the Dodgers, I think the hype is just going to go up, and he's going to, you know, come closer to like, you know, pick 50-ish maybe, where like Yamamoto settled last year, right?
Yeah, I could see that. That's a good call.
And I honestly have slightly more concerns with Sasaki than I did. I know I was all over Yamamoto last year. I'm not going to be that case this year with Sasaki, just because the stuff metrics and the fastball velocity declining last year is a pretty big concern for me, at least in the short term. Like I think Sasaki could win Cy Youngs. Like that's how good he is. He's coming over that young. I think that, you know, eventually he will. I just would want to see it first, that he's fully healthy, you know, and none of those stuff dropped off last year. And he gets back to like what we saw in the WDBC 2 years ago when he was thrown closer to 100 rather than like sitting the 97 that he's at now. So that being said, especially as someone that drafts pitchers a little bit later, I've learned to, be a little bit safer if Imanaga is like an SP2 ish, SP1 potentially for me in drafts like that. Like I think that Imanaga, wow, a lot of the pristine numbers came early in the year when he was making his first when teams were seeing him for the first time, before they had a true book on him, at least from the major league level. There was some regression in the second half for him. And yeah, it's not elite K upside, but the command is amazing. Just a 4% walk rate. That splitter is unreal. And then the shape of his fastball, despite the 92 fastball velocity, makes him as safe as a bet as you can get in this area. So despite the excitedness for Sasaki and the warranted hype around him, I'm going to lean Imanaga in this battle.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's tough. I think I definitely agree. I don't think it's much of a debate that the ADP helium will hit Sasaki to where this probably won't even be a left and right choice. And I do think
we're doing this right now, though, man. We're making the choice right now.
I know. I do have Imanaga as a circled pitcher that I would be happy about to kind of lead my staff if I wait. But from just for the sake of it, I will say Roki Sasaki for at least for just in a vacuum, who will be better in 2025. I think it'll look a lot different, but I think the strikeout stuff just looks so filthy. Like, and maybe I'm just falling victim to like the pitching ninja
gifts,
recency bias from like looking him up. But the Dodgers know what they're doing for the most part with pitching, and that obviously comes as well with some win potential that the Cubs won't have as much of.
It's probably going to be it is going to be a 6-man rotation for the Dodgers. They have so much depth. I know that was like a running joke last year that they were getting starts from Walker Bueller's bounce back and some of the names that they threw out there in the World Series, right? Who made starts for them with how many injured guys they had. So they are going to, handle the staff with kid gloves, especially a guy coming over that, in Japan, they start every 6 days, right? They don't go 5 days. It's like you have a day of the week and you pitch then. So they're going to I'm assuming they're going to stick into that schedule, especially having Yamamoto on the staff too, Ohtani coming back from elbow injury. So they're going to handle those guys with kid gloves. So there's probably not going to be any 2-start weeks. If you draft Sasaki, there's going to be shenanigans around the All-Star break of, being the last guy back on this coming back from the All-Star break. So it's going like 2 weeks of a break, all things like that. So that's another thing to consider where, Imanaga made his 29 starts this year and pitched 173 innings. So he did it and looked damn good doing it. So I'd go Imanaga here.
Yeah, that's a good argument. I love Imanaga, so I'm good. I'm glad to hear that, and we can call that one a split. Talking about another Cub and back to the outfield, pick 84 and pick 87. We got Saya Suzuki for the Cubs and Luis Robert for the White Sox. This is, again, looking at all of the outfielders, Steve, to me, it's just like, it feels different than years past where, like, in my opinion, I'm kind of settling at an ADP tax. For this one, I know that we as a show have talked highly of Saya Suzuki for several years.
So underrated.
He is. That said, it's really hard for me with the tools for Robert and just like one full season removed from what was damn near 40-20. And can it get any worse in Chicago? And will he even end up in Chicago by the end of the season? Like all of those
by the start of spring training.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there's the rumor mill's already rolling. So I think I'm going Robert here just off of the fact that, like, I think Suzuki will just be I don't know. It's almost like an Anthony Santander thing where it's like, I know exactly what he is, but I think Robert could pop off and quickly go back to being like, I mean, remember it wasn't long ago when he was kind of in the same breath as like first round, second round range. And in terms of like the skills, the age 27, none of that has gone away in terms of the player himself. It's just he's been in a terrible situation. Yeah. He's been banged up. And with that has come some unlucky seasons, but I don't think he just overnight turned into kind of a washed up outfielder. But Suzuki is a higher floor guy.
He still had 14 homers and 23 steals in 100 games last year.
Right. So you're still getting some production. So I think I would lean Robert just because I don't know that Suzuki, like, I guess I question the ceiling of Suzuki, but talk to me if you disagree, because I know you've liked Suzuki over the years.
I'm going to go Suzuki. I think it's a safer play, and I just think he is a perennially underrated player, hitter. That being said, like, Robert is the upside play. Like,
yeah,
there is a world where Robert gets traded. I don't know. Let's say he'll probably get traded to the Dodgers because they just get everybody, right. You can just protect everybody to the Dodgers, right? They just signed Tanner Scott today or yesterday. Absolutely insane. Good for them. They could do it. Any team could probably come close to doing it. So they just don't. Dodgers just play the game that people don't want to. So good for them. That's a short little tangent. But Suzuki is just maybe is a better real life hitter than fantasy. I agree. Mm-hmm. He probably doesn't have the 30 homer upside. But that being said, he did lose a good amount of time to injury the last 2 years and had 20 homers and 21 homers in 138 and 132 at bats or games in the last 2 seasons. So full season, maybe he could pitch closer to the upper 20s, with a good average, takes a walk, should have better counting stats than the 75 and 73 runs and RBIs essentially he's had over the last 2 years. So, the K rate did go up a little bit, but he barrels the ball, hits the ball extremely hard, has a great max exit velocity. Like, I just think Suzuki's like a professional hitter that's criminally underrated. And maybe he's not so much this year at his ADP. It's been a little bit lower the last few years. Now he's in the top 100. I think he was probably closer to like 100-ish last year. Mm-hmm. But Robert has the same injury concerns, right?
That's fair.
Much worse lineup context, and who knows like what that does to a player mentally as far as like wanting to come back and dealing with the situation of essentially losing all the time like he did last year. Like that I know there's no number for that, and that's the softest analysis that you can get. But I doubt that Robert's battling to get back to the 25-1 White Sox when he's dealing with hamstring injuries all year, right? So I'm going to go Suzuki. I just think he's perennially underrated and just a great hitter, while acknowledging that Robert has first round upside, Suzuki does not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you bring up good points on Suzuki, and I think looking at these guys as like OF 21 and 22, mm-hmm. This is a range that I would be happy to grab one of these guys, because I think you're getting two different things, but I guess
Suzuki did have 16 steals last year too.
That's true.
There was some there was some speed projected in his profile when he came over, and then only stole 9 in 2020, and then in 2023, the first year of the new rules, right? He only stole stick, got caught 7 times, and he stole 16 this year. That was definitely helpful to his roto value, for sure. So sorry to interrupt there. Just wanted
no, but I think my broader point is whether it's the high floor of Suzuki with a little bit of upside, or the low floor of Robert with the huge upside, mm-hmm. or huge ceiling. I think I'm buying both of those players and possible outcomes at this ADP of like 85, 86 versus the tax that's happening for like Teoscar at 62, Wood at 51, Langford at 45. Like I kind of like shopping in this area. So yeah, that's kind of where I fall.
This is an area where I'm looking pitcher a lot of the time too, though. So
that's true. That's a hard part.
Maybe we can switch that up a little bit and go with a pitcher in the 50s, and then take one of these stats here if we like them better.
Yeah, I like that. Well, let's shift over to pitchers right in this range, because we got Bryce Miller at 88 and Bailey Ober at a fraction of a point away, also at 88. Man, I know, Steve, that you're big on Bryce Miller. I know that we both had Bailey Ober throughout the last season. This seems like another kind of 2-pack that we'd be pretty excited about. But you're getting different things with like the extension of Ober and the the fastball that dominates and all, and and the secondaries that have come along, and then Bryce, who we just saw a great season, and obviously he comes with the wild card of like the splitter. I think of the two, I don't know, man. You've almost convinced me on Miller, but I kind of lean Ober just because I'm a sucker for the extension, and he's so dominant. And it's like, I know it's a big if, but if you take away his blow up homers, or if you just say that's who he is, and it's kind of like the Aaron Nola thing, I feel so confident about that. Whereas Miller, it was like, yeah, last year looked great and it all clicked. But we've seen it where it's been ugly, and it's just like a shorter track record, I guess. So I don't know. They're very different. I like them both, but I think I'm slightly leaning Bailey Ober. I could be convinced on that though. Where do you fall?
I had to make this exact choice for my SP2 in the current draft and hold that I'm in round 10. And I was debating between Miller and Ober. And I went Bryce Miller. Ober went about almost 3/4 of a round later, middle of round 11. Interesting, the stars that went between Miller and Ober were Nola, Max Fried, Luis Castillo, Logan Webb, Tanner Bibee, and Sonny Gray. So I was considering both of those guys over all of those guys essentially. That was my debate. And I went Miller. I did so just because I'm not really convinced, but I went with the command of Miller, at least seeming like, again, they have the same exact walk rate, and Ober's is better. But I guess the fastball velocity sort of nudged me one way. Like, these guys are similar pitchers. Maybe Ober has more of an out pitch with that changeup. Miller's still like working on all the secondaries, but I think there's a lot there in terms of a highly graded stuff. Plus on the slider, I know he doesn't use it that much. Maybe there's some more ways that he can integrate that into his repertoire. The splitter looks intriguing. I think there's a few more things for Miller to tap into that could lead to higher upsides. That being said, I absolutely love Bailey Ober. Yeah, it was a 3.98 ERA, but like 2 of those runs came in 2 starts, like one in that beginning of the season, and then that one start where it was in my fantasy playoffs versus Atlanta in their rain. I think you were eliminated because of this. I hate to bring this up again, but like, it was a start that, like, it was pouring rain. It was the Atlanta lineup. They shouldn't even been playing, and he gave up like 10 runs in like a third of an inning. That just shot his ERA up from, like, I think it was like close to under 2 to like above 4. And it was just absolute disaster. So like, you could do all those fun stats, like outside of those 2 stats, Ober had like a 2 ERA, something like that. They all count the same. But I think there's just a little bit more to tap into as far as Bryce Miller's upside. And also, anytime you mention Bryce Miller, you have to give Ashton a shout out in the Discord. I'm sure his ears are ringing because he's just the biggest Bryce Miller stan that there ever was. So shout out to Ashton. But it's close, but I lean Miller, and I'll go Miller for there.
It was
this argument.
it was good to see Miller get up to 180 innings, and the ratios were great. I know what you're saying. It seems like there might be a little bit more polish of like a pitcher's pitcher, whereas
Sure.
Ober,
You kind of have to buy the extension, like what's this low velocity? You know, it's more.
yeah,
You know, you kind of have to watch them. Like I hate, you know, I sound like a watch the game nerd, but you know, there's a lot to like with Ober as well, despite it not coming in some traditional metrics that you would see, like fastball velocity.
Mm-hmm. Yep, but I like both of those names there too. So for what it's worth, that slight leaning to Ober, despite the fact that yes, as you mentioned, Steve, he ended my all important home league last year. That was devastating. But yeah, I'll be back in. I'm ready to be hurt again,
Yeah.
and I would take Miller too. I think in both great organizations.
But you're going Miller. You're going Ober for.
I'm going
for
Ober.
this
I'm going
argument.
Ober. You're going Miller on that one, but
cool.
I do like them both. Last one feels somewhat uneventful, Steve, but a couple names we haven't talked about too much is Matt McClain at 91 and Jordan Westberg at 92. And this is an area where you can address second base. This is our second base 5 off the board in Westberg, and then they actually got him at 90, so that might have been updated and even tonight. And then Matt McClain at 91.
So right next to each other.
And yeah, Westberg, it's kind of seemed like he got lost in all the noise of like the prospect hype, because he was on a lot of like the Eric Cross dynasty rankings and watch out for this guy. And then we saw him a little bit in 2023, and it was pretty disappointing in 68 games, just a 715 OPS. Like, it's fine, a 260 average. But last year tapped into the power in 107 games, had 18 homers. Obviously, the Orioles offense is one that you'd want to be a part of. So I get it with Westberg. It's not like a 5 category stud, but at second base, it's a definite contributor. And then at least on the surface, I feel like Matt McClain has had louder contributions in terms of like the 864 OPS, hit 290.
89 games too, had 16 homers and 14 steals.
Yeah, like that's super
he was
exciting.
like a fantasy MVP for those 89 games.
Yeah, and then shoulder surgery comes along, wrecks a ton of people's drafts who went with them, who were all excited. And now we're back to 2025 here and looking at this, and it's like, I'm curious in terms of let me pull up real quick where Steamer has McClain's projections, because shoulder surgery is no joke coming back from that, but they've got him at 23 homers, 17 steals, a 259 average. And then you got Westberg at 19 homers, 8 steals, and a 264 average. So I think you're definitely taking McClain from like the Steamer projections, but he's going a couple picks later. I guess you give the edge to Westberg in terms of like the offensive context, but then ballpark context, you got to give to McClain. Yeah. So after you do all the mental gymnastics here, I personally would kind of be leaning toward Matt McClain. It seems like the exciting one, but I want to hear where you're at.
Yeah, Oopsie, the new projection system that's on Fangraphs by Jordan Rosenblum, worked with Eno Saris and Creating Stuff Plus, all that. Great follower on Twitter too. I think it's Jordan in Finland. I believe he's on Blue Sky as well. So shout out Jordan. The Oopsie projection for McClain is even more exciting at 22 homers and 22 steals, which I think I buy more because like he did have 27 steals and only caught 3 times in Double-A. I know, like, you know, the joke is that some minor league catchers, you know, need a cutoff man to catch guys stealing bases and things like that. So you have to take those numbers with great assault. But still, he had the 14 in the 89 games in 2023. So yeah, it is exciting. That being said, I'm going Jordan Westberg. It's just, you know, we didn't see Matt McClain at all last year. It did come with a high K rate and a lowish walk rate, so not the most ideal plate approach that you like to see from Matt McClain, and the fact that he had the 29% strikeout rate in 2023 when he did have that. And Westberg, you know, I maybe, you know, the homer and steal ceiling is a little bit lower, but he struck out only 22% of the time. Again, another guy that doesn't really take a walk. but had a 12% barrel rate, hit the ball hard 46% of the time. Anytime you could pair, like I'm a sucker for guys that could barrel up the ball, hit the ball hard, and have, a better than average K rate. And that's what Jordan Westburg does. Because of that, I'm going to go with him over McLean, while acknowledging that, McLean was absolutely amazing. It is an 89-game sample in 2023. I think there should be, a bit of an asterisk there, because it was just 89 games. It was a small sample, and we did not see him at all last year, right? Like, there could have very well been a slump after that easily bites into that 290 average that he had, and 507 slug, which, is all great and well. And, the counting stats could still be piling up, but I would not be projecting for Matt McLean to bat anywhere close to 290 next year, especially if he runs a K rate in the high 20s, like he did in 2023.
Okay. All right. Well, that wraps us up. I slight lean McLean, Steve is Westburg, and kind of trust in the process that there's more room to grow there. But yeah, Steve, this was fun. I think looking at the whole set, I've certainly, through the exercise, started to figure out where I wanted to land with certain battles, because these pop up in drafts. Yeah. So hopefully it helped some of the listeners as well. Any closing thoughts, Steve, before we wrap? I know we ran super long on this one, but it was a great topic, great rundown.
No, all good. No, it was a long one, but this was a fun one. So again, yeah, maybe we'll have to add this to the schedule to do a round 2, maybe with a little shorter names. But I mean, hey, we wanted to do think about it, this was just a top 100 picks, so you can get into a lot more as you get deeper in drafts. But it's fun making these decisions, and fun hearing your side and what you would take too. So
it is
great show. Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, thank you for tuning in. Again, we'll be back in a couple weeks, and in between then, you'll get Steve Gisueli on PitchCon as well. So we'll have that on the socials.
Next week.
Yeah, next week. So that we'll definitely make sure we retweet that stuff out and everything. But until next time, you guys can follow us on Twitter at WinsbowPod. I'm at _verified. Steve is at Stav8818, and on Blue Sky at Winsbub Fantasy, and Steve is at Stav8818. I'm at Van-verified. And thank you guys, as always, for talking baseball with us. We'll talk to you next time.
Thanks, guys.